Hi guys, it's Tamra coming back at you with another video. Welcome back to my channel. We're going to go ahead and jump into our topic, which is going to be the final topic of the month, considering that we're moving into June 2018. Wow, where'd the time go? Honestly, I feel like I've been kind of like rushing through every single day and every week. And I honestly feel like everything is slipping out of my hands. And then here comes June the 1st. And I feel even worse. But we're here and we're going to be changing our topic starting on Monday. So over the past few weeks, we've been talking about trauma. We've been talking about trauma bonding or traumatic bonding. We've been talking about recovering from traumatic bonding. We've been talking about traumatic relationships in connection to borderline personality disorder. So we've been on this topic for a little while. And so we're going to conclude this topic with one of my specialized areas of expertise, which is intergenerational trauma. And basically what that is it's trauma throughout the development and lifespan of various family members. So we're going to jump on that. The benefits for you in this video today is going to be that you're going to be able to define what intergenerational trauma is. You're also going to be able to identify some patterns of behavior that may be happening in your family and you're not aware that it's happening. So let's go ahead and get started, okay? Because we have a couple things I want to focus on. I wrote some things down on my list, of course, because I have short-term memory and I can't keep all of this stuff in my mind. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to talk about the first sign of intergenerational trauma. But before I do that, let me define what it is. So I define intergenerational trauma as any specific traumatic experience that has continued throughout the family history. Any trauma that started with family members way back, a great grandmother, a great uncle, a great aunt, somebody who married into the family and created chaos or trauma. So intergenerational trauma is something that starts way back in a family history, but it has influence and negative patterns of behavior that the family has developed, right? It kind of stems from that, but it's negative influences throughout the lifespan of the family, throughout the development and the progression of the family line. My family, we're interesting because we're very split in not only our culture, but also our belief systems, as with any other family, I'm sure. But my particular problem, I think, with my family is we have this idea that there's been an intergenerational curse on the family, but we don't exactly know why, and we don't exactly know where it came from. We just know that it's this repeated pattern of behaviors with certain family members throughout the lifespan of our family history. My family has a very interesting background. So my mom's side of the family is both African American and Cherokee. And my great grandmother was so wrapped up in tribes, it's not even funny. But my mom's side, we have African American and Cherokee descent. And then on my dad's side, we have German, Irish, and we have Caucasian roots on my dad's side. So we have a pretty intermixed family. Well, through both of those family lines, my dad and my mom, we believe that there's an intergenerational curse that has influenced the family history because we see repeated patterns of things over time, and no family member has had any kind of influence on the other to copy them or to live like they lived. It's just this repeated pattern that we can't seem to break. So I'm sure I'm not the only one. I have lots of clients who believe the same thing. I even have clients who are like, well, how do I break this curse? And I don't think that we are, as a field of clinical psychology, I don't think we're really ready to tackle that subject. And unfortunately, a lot of psychologists don't even broach this topic. So that's one of the reasons why I'm going to broach it today. So I want to point out a couple of signs of an intergenerational traumatic history or an intergenerational curse, whatever you choose to call it. All right, so let's start with the first one. The first one is a long lineage of unresolved emotions. So let's say, for example, your great-grandmother never dealt with her emotions appropriately. She was raised in a very traumatic and physically as well as sexually abusive home environment. Because of that, there were long and real changes neurologically, biologically, and psychologically. And I'm going to define some of these things. So just kind of keep your eyes around me here, because I'm going to start like posting stuff so you can follow me. So let's say your grandmother grew up in a very traumatic household. She had neurobiological changes, she had psychological changes, and then she also had emotional as well as physical changes because of that trauma. As a result, she grew up as someone who was very closed off, very shy, very emotionally unstable, very untrusting. She decides to marry a man that she has known only for 2 weeks. Only for 2 weeks. She then has children that she doesn't really want because they're too much of a burden to her. Okay? Follow me? Are you following me? Just keep following me. So she decides to try to raise these kids because she realizes that she doesn't want to give them up for adoption because there's social backlash and stigma associated with that. She also kind of loves her children, so she's going to try to raise them. So unfortunately, because of her unstable background and her unstable view of life and her children and romantic relationships, she begins to psychologically and emotionally abuse her own children. These kids then begin to develop neurobiological, psychological, emotional, and physical trauma. And so then those kids grow up and the same things happen to their children. That's an example of intergenerational trauma. It's one specific patriarch or one specific person who experiences something traumatic, doesn't bounce back, doesn't have treatment, doesn't have support, isn't resilient, begins to have children of their own and then perpetuate that trauma. So that's intergenerational trauma. So in that particular situation, we have unresolved emotions because there was no therapy, there was no support, the family was pretty unstable all the way around. And so those unresolved emotions caused her to go into a relationship that was short-term and unstable and then have children that she really didn't want. And then trying to raise them, she in turn began to traumatize them. Okay, so unresolved emotions. The next sign of intergenerational trauma is negative and repeated patterns of beliefs and behavior. So let's say that the same woman who had children, didn't really want them, got married after 2 weeks of knowing this guy. Let's say, for example, her children begin to grow up and believe that, well, the way my mom lived is the appropriate way to live. And because I was raised under an unstable mom, it's going to be really hard for me to see the world any differently than what my mom has seen it in. So if you have that kind of mindset with those kids, right, they are going to perpetuate that belief system to their own kids and to the rest of society and to other, people that they connect with. So negative and repeated patterns of beliefs and behaviors. And I hate to say this, but research suggests that kids who have been severely abused and neglected oftentimes perpetuate those behaviors into their adulthood and into their relationships with other people. Okay, the next one is untreated or poorly treated substance abuse or mental health. In intergenerational trauma, when we have trauma throughout a family line, there is often untreated or poorly treated mental health and substance abuse issues. Now, we all know that substance abuse issues that are not taken care of often perpetuate and get worse. And so then we have addiction, and then we have rehabs and rehabilitation programs and drug and alcohol programs and AA meetings and Narcotics Anonymous and lots of people, though some recover, they just spiral into the system and they just keep going and going and going, and sometimes they go down and get worse. Untreated or poorly treated mental health, I'm sure you can identify some of the issues there as well. If it's untreated or poorly treated mental health, we can't heal the trauma, and the person can't get better either. All right. The next one is poor parent-child relationships that perpetuate throughout the lifespan. Let's say the same woman has a very negative relationship with her children, her own children, and those kids have their kids, and then they have a poor relationship. So for me, when I see repeated patterns of poor parent-child relationships throughout a family lifespan, I call it intergenerational trauma, especially if those kids have, had untreated mental health or untreated substance abuse issues, or, if they have post-traumatic stress disorder. We're talking intergenerational trauma that has had an influence on the poor parent-child relationships, okay? The next one is complicated personalities. Now, I have talked about, and I'm gonna link right up here for you so you can watch that video. I did talk about borderline personality disorder as having a correlation between trauma and instability. I believe that's what I focused on, which was the impulsivity, the emotional instability of the person. So BPD and trauma have a correlation. And so when I'm talking about complicated personalities with intergenerational trauma, I'm saying that somebody was traumatized and somebody wasn't very resilient. They developed a personality disorder in the process because they didn't know how to protect themselves, or, all of the trauma just intermixed with genes and biology, and boom, you've got borderline personality, or you've got narcissism, or you've got a sociopath, right? So one sign for me of intergenerational trauma is a repeated pattern of personality disorders, right? So we have grandma who has BPD, the aunt has BPD, the cousin has BPD, right? So one of the things I look for when I see clients is that intergenerational personality disorder. Is this something that has occurred over the lifespan? And if so, why? All right. And last but not least, a major sign of intergenerational trauma would be contentment with the way things are. I think once a person realizes that, okay, this is generational, there's nothing I can do about it, I'm not going to get better, my kids are not going to get better, this is just the way we are, right? The person who might have the power to change the intergenerational trauma or pattern doesn't, because at this point, they're completely tired, they're completely over it, they don't know what to do, so they kind of resolve it within themselves that they're just going to be this way. And so a contentment develops as a result. All right, guys, thanks so much for being with me today. I know that was a lot that I threw at you, so I encourage you in the comment section below, post your questions and your concerns below. I do read them. I do hear you guys, which is one of the reasons why we have been talking about trauma. I've had a lot of requests for this particular topic. So I encourage you to send me tweets. You can send me messages to my website. You can also send me messages to my email address. All that information is going to be at the end of the video. You can catch me at my website, www.anchoredinKnowledge.com. You're going to see that at the end of the video as well. You can also tweet me any questions or concerns that you might have, or simply post them in the comment section below. I encourage you to give this video a thumbs up if it was helpful to you. What that does is it pushes the video to the top of the search results in YouTube, and so that makes it available for everybody else. So you're kind of giving back when you hit the like button, so I appreciate that in advance. I also encourage you to hit the subscribe button that's right here on the side. That way, when I post new videos, you will get those reminders, they are called. Okay, guys? So stay tuned for next week. Monday, I'm going to be starting off a new topic of disruptive behavior disorders with children. And the first topic that I'm going to be talking about is children who are struggling in the school system with behavior problems and what not, and what to say to the school. So stay tuned for that. All right, guys, thanks so much, and I will see you next week with a new video. Bye-bye.